and went to war and tried to execute those terrible things that they said. That's right. That's why you make peace deals with your enemies and not with your best friends. We don't need to make a peace deal with your best friend. You need to make it with your worst enemy.
Athlone TV is now live. Streaming World of Warcraft, SoD Hunter PvP / leveling.
Propaganda that the Muslims cannot make peace and that they are so violent they must be occupied ad infinitum forever and ever is absurd, right? So obviously
absurd, right? Alright, we need to test this audio because I have not tested this in quite some time, and I don't know. What the fuck was that? I pretend to be an NPC. Oh, you're doing that shit again? You fuck. Alright, let's go to my channel and hear what it sounds like. Hopefully it sounds like... Oh, you're doing that shit again? You fuck. Alright, let's go to my channel and hear what it sounds like. Hopefully it sounds... Alright, let's test this out. So... That's because I typed in the wrong shit. There we go. Alright, so... Testing 1, 2, 3... Blah, 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 blah. There we go. Alright, so... Testing 1, 2, 3... Blah, 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 blah. There we go. Alright, so... Cool.
Think. Yeah, so there's actually a couple things I agree with Destiny on. One is the definition of occupying force and also the discussion of apartheid. Obviously, Israel's in control. They control the borders, they control the sovereignty of Gaza and the West Bank. And when you can cut off the water and the power to an area, you definitely control it. You can call it occupation, you can call it apartheid, you can call it anything you like, but the bottom line is Israel controls those areas and can do pretty much anything they like within those areas. So now when it comes to, hey, why a peace deal with Jordan and Egypt and not the Palestinians? Well, and is it because the Palestinians are inveterate terrorists and they just can't help themselves and just want to do violence and terrorism, as opposed to the other lovely Arabs around there who desire peace? And Israel, the peace seekers, does it with all their other neighbors, but not Palestine. No, absurd. So number one, it's not, Destiny's not wrong in saying that Egypt said a lot of terrible things about Israelis and Jews, etc., and went to war and tried to execute those terrible things that they said. That's right. That's because, and that's why you make peace deals with your enemies and not with your best friends. We don't need to make a peace deal with your best friend. You need to make it with your worst enemy. And so, but the important part of that is that once they made the peace deal, it stuck. So the idea, the propaganda that the Muslims cannot make peace and that they are so violent they must be occupied ad infinitum forever and ever is absurd, right? So obviously Egypt made a peace deal, and despite all of the rhetoric, totally abided by it. In fact, part of the reason why Gaza is an open air prison is, yes, Israel controls its borders, and Destiny is right that Egypt also doesn't allow the Palestinians to control their border on Egypt, but that's because of the peace deal that Egypt and Israel made, and Egypt is abiding by that, no matter how unpopular it is, even within their own country, because their own population hates the brutal occupation of the Palestinians. But nevertheless, the Egyptian government says, no, I will abide by what Israel wants because of that peace deal. For Jordan to make a peace deal with Israel, much easier. For the UAE or Saudi Arabia to make a peace deal, much easier, because they're not occupied and there's no skin in the game. There's the moral support that they'd like to give their Arab brothers, potentially, maybe, but it's a much easier lift. And these days, Saudi Arabia, UAE actually agrees with Israel on 90% of stuff anyway. The hard part is what happened to the Palestinians. And so I don't want to over belabor going back to the history of 1948, but it is important in this context. So when Israel started, they came in and they said, okay, we're going to take half this land. Now, at that point, was half the population Jewish or eventually Israeli? No, of course not. And so they took it by force. And yes, the United Nations said they're allowed to take it by force, but tons of Palestinians were driven from their homes that they actually lived in, and they were told, you no longer can live in your homes. No, this is now a Jewish state, and you Muslims are now second-class citizens, or you're driven from the land. And by the time we got to the Oslo Accords, Israel controlled 78% of that land. And so the Palestinians were like, well, okay. And they were ready to make a deal on the remaining 22%. But then Ehud Barak was like, no, I want more. I want you to be confined to maybe 18% or 16%. And the Palestinians were like, well, when are you ever going to be satisfied? And the reality is, I probably would have taken that deal because I understood that the Palestinians had no leverage at all. And with the awesome might of the American military behind Israel and our funding, that the Israelis were just going to grab more and more and more Palestinian land. And since then, that's exactly what they've done. So which leads to the last point for now, which is that, so they say, well, Gaza, we kind of left, and they don't have sovereignty. They can't control their borders, but they could govern themselves a little bit. And those sons of bitches still aren't satisfied. They don't have a state, but these unruly people will not accept being imprisoned, and they do violent attacks against Israel. So we hate them, and that's why we can't let them have sovereignty. But wait a minute. How about the West Bank, where they have actually abided by all of Israel's rules for decades now? The Palestinian Authority works along with the Israelis to enforce the occupation, yet Israel has still given them nothing. And the occupation continues, and it is obvious to everyone watching that Netanyahu and his government have no interest in peace, and they've stated it several times. The Israeli ambassador recently said, no, they are not looking for a peace solution, and they're not looking for two states, which means they're looking for permanent occupation, or perhaps one state where they drive the Palestinians into the sea. So there is no excuse for the occupation. The Palestinians in the West Bank have done everything right, and they're still enormously occupied, and the settlers grab more land every day, and they brutalize the Palestinians more every single day. So if Israel was actually willing to make peace, as Yitzhak Rabin was before he was assassinated, then they could get to a peace deal incredibly quickly.
Destiny?
Yeah, I disagree with almost everything. So first of all, the characterization of, when we talk about the Palestinian people and why they don't want peace, this idea of like, are we being racist, or is it because we're Islamophobic? Are they just Muslims or whatever? I don't think any of that has a factor in here. And if you're analyzing the region and why these people don't want peace, I don't think that would be your driving force to saying they don't want it is because they're Muslim or because they're Arab. I think the problem is that the Palestinian people historically have been amped up by every single country around them for decades to fight for their entire country back. Every single country around this area was highly motivated in expelling all of the Jewish people out of Israel since the foundation of the country in 48. However, as time has gone on and as the Arab states have realized, well, I guess this is probably not going to happen, and as bilateral peace agreements have fallen between the Arab states and the Israeli country, yes, you're right, these peace deals, once they're made, they stick, but it's the other Arab countries that are making the peace deals. It's not the Palestinians. Egypt made peace, Jordan made peace, and we saw several countries under the Abraham Accords make peace, and once they did, Israel and those countries were chill, but nobody really seemed to bring the Palestinians along with them when the Arab countries were negotiating these peace deals, and the Palestinian people don't really seem interested in a peace. Seems like they're still interested in fighting, which is especially true if you look at who they consider themselves aligned with today, which is Hezbollah, Iran, and the Houthis, and then, whatever money they get shipped in from Qatar and whatever floats in from Turkey. So the allies that the Palestinians have today are more radical than they ever have been, especially the people that exist and operate out of the Gaza Strip, like Hamas or Islamic Jihad. So to say that like this is just a peaceful group of people that only desire peace or whatever is not necessarily true, but it's not because they're Muslim or because they're brown or because they're Arab or any weird reason like that. It's just because of the historical conditions that have led the Palestinian people to see Israel as an enemy that they could fight off if they just simply fought hard enough. I believe this is reflected in polling pre and post October 7th, where when you poll both Israelis and Palestinians, a majority of them in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip and in Israel proper believe that if they continue to fight, the outcomes for them will only improve. improve. That's a position that they still all have. So the idea that you can pursue a meaningful peace with a group of people that believes this is probably not true. When you talk about like Egypt enforcing their border and that's some part of like an Israeli peace deal, that is absolutely not true. Egypt has had their own issues with, for instance, supplying electricity and water into the Gaza Strip, where I believe in 2017 a big crisis was caused because Hamas stopped paying their bills on it. Egypt has wanted to keep that border secure because for historical and modern reasons, they do not like anything associated with the Muslim Brotherhood, and they don't like the fact that terrorists come from that region, and because even the modern Egyptian president has said that much like in the past with exactly what happened with Jordan and exactly what happened with Lebanon, if you let a bunch of Palestinian people cross that border and sit in your country, eventually they're going to use it as a staging ground for terrorist attacks, or they're going to try to coup you if you don't support their struggle, which again has historically been what Palestinian groups have done as they've moved out into surrounding countries. The current president of Egypt, El-Sisi, I don't know how to pronounce his name or whatever, has literally made this exact statement of being afraid of Palestinians operating from the Sinai, which is again a legitimate fear. When we talk about like Ehud Barak wanting more and more and more during negotiations in Camp David, that is just not true. Everybody around the world, including all of the Arab leaders, were shocked because Arafat walked into those negotiations where people were praying that they would get 91% of the original land that they had in the 67 borders, if we go by that. And I believe by the end of negotiations, it was up to 95% with, I think, 3% land swaps, 1 to 3% land swaps. And by the end of the Clinton parameters in the Taba Summit, it was up to 90, I think it might have been 95 to 97%. But Arafat always walked away from the deal because he thought that if he fought, he could get more. And that has been the history of Palestinian negotiations with Israel. To say that if Israel wanted peace, they would simply have peace is just not true, because peace with the Palestinians has always been contingent on either a one-state solution or a bastardized two-state solution with an infinite right of return that would eventually become a one-state solution. And every single Arab leader in the region has balked at Arafat for walking away from things like Camp David and have been shocked that he didn't agree to any of these proposals. And yeah, I don't think there's been any sane person that said that that Arafat was negotiating in good faith for any of these deals. And the idea that Ehud Barak was the one who was walking away from it, or he was pushing for more, when he literally hinged his entire political career, along with Clinton to some extent, not as much for Clinton because he was a two-term president, right, on settling these peace deals, and then he lost afterwards, is I think, ahistorical. Yeah, when we look at the difference also between the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, you know, people will say like, well, the West Bank has been peaceful. I mean, kind of. There are terrorist attacks that originate from there. Hamas will even operate out of there at some points. But to say that like the treatment of the people in the West Bank is the same as the people in the Gaza Strip is just not true. The West Bank is not under the same sort of embargo or blockade or conditions that exist in the Gaza Strip, and that's for good reason. I think that if the people in the Gaza Strip were to chill, I think that you'd probably see conditions there be similar to the West Bank conditions, and hopefully some sort of negotiated peace agreement can be reached. But obviously there's a lot of issues with the Palestinian Authority, and that both Israel and the Palestinians don't seem to like them very much. And there's a lot of issues with Palestinian leadership. Historically, it was Arafat, and then from 2004 to modern day, it's Abbas. And again, everybody hates these Palestinian leaders for a variety of reasons.
Jen?
Yeah, so a lot to address there. So first, on blaming the other Arab countries. Yeah, I got no love for the leadership of many of those Arab countries, but
fuck, man, where is the weak aura
why don't they help
that I had?
Or they push the Palestinians to not get good deals. I
That
don't know how that helps.
marksmanship,
They're not
bro.
occupying the Palestinians. The Israelis are occupying the Palestinians. So it's just a way of shifting blame. Why don't the other Arabs do something, okay? Well, they're not occupying the Palestinians. Israel is. So it's absurd. It's an absurd thing to say. And then what Destiny kept going back to is, oh, the Palestinians are aligned with radicals. Oh, they do terrorism. Oh, can you believe that they're going to more fundamentalist Islam, etc.? And they do this wherever they go. Come on, I don't think you mean that. There's no Palestinians in America.
Wait a second, Destiny, did you mean wherever they go, or do you mean only in Gaza?
I mean that there is an established history. In 1970, Black September, the PLO, led by Arafat, literally tried to coup the Jordanian king. I mean, when they moved up to Lebanon, like the civil wars in the 80s and afterwards that followed were because of Palestinian resistance groups, or largely contributed to this. The Fedayeen was sponsored by Nasser in Egypt all across the Israeli border, from Lebanon to Syria to Jordan to Egypt. Yes, the Palestinians, when they go to other countries, they
Hold on, I'm trying to find this
the
weak
PFDL or whatever,
aura.
the Palestinian Liberation People's Front or whatever, were launching terrorist attacks on hijacking planes. There was the Munich massacre. Like, yeah, obviously this happens. Of course it does. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I now I understand what he's saying, and it all goes back to the same exact point. So he's like, they keep fighting back. When are they going to know that they're conquered and just accept that they're lesser than the Israelis, and they should just accept their goddamn occupation. So, so why are the Palestinians doing terrorism in Munich? Because they're trying to get rid of the occupation. Now, I don't agree with that tactic. I don't think it's a constructive tactic, and I don't think it's a moral tactic. But that's why they're doing it. And why do they then lead efforts to overthrow the Jordanian government, etc.? Because once you put people in a position where they're subjugated, they are going to go to the most radical positions that are possible. Because the people who push for moderation, and this happened when we invaded Iraq, when U.S. invaded Iraq, we thought, oh, when we do an invasion and we bomb the living crap out of Iraq and we oppress them and say, we're now your new rulers, well, I bet moderate forces come out and start a wonderful democracy. Well, of course that didn't happen. The most radical forces immediately won. And it was, you know, all of the most fundamentalist forms of Islam, first with the Shia, then with the Sunni, that were ascendant. That's what happens when you subjugate people, when you oppress people, they go to a radical position. So now when you do peace deals, they do not go to a radical position. They become a lot more moderate. And the Palestinians, and this is why I mentioned the racism, the Palestinians are not immune from being human
this is not the right one.
All human beings, after peace deals, generally speaking, moderate their positions. When they are being oppressed,
I mean, I guess this one's fine, but this is not the right one.
They do not moderate their positions. That is true of all human beings. And to constantly set up this endless cycle of, I oppress you, I give you no rights, I humiliate you for decades on end, I murder your family anytime I like, can you believe the sons of bitches are fighting back? It's all their fault, they're violent, they're radicals wherever they go, they're violent wherever they go. It's an absurd, unsolvable equation that you put on the Palestinians' heads. So, and now to the land issue and the peace issue. I mean, Destiny, if I take 78% of your house, then I say to you, well, look, I got a peace offer for you. I'm going to give you 95% of the 22% that you have left. Am I not merciful? I don't think that you would think like, oh my God, you're so generous. You're telling me that I can keep 95% of the 22%? What a humanitarian you are. Nevertheless, by the way, if you flip it on me, the Palestinians, I would have taken that deal because it only got worse. And what Arafat never understood, and I'm not defending Arafat at all, is that you have no power. Israel is 2,000 times stronger than you, and America is 2 million times stronger than you. The deal is only going to get worse until you have no land at all. So that knucklehead never understood that. I would have taken the deal. But having said that, even Bill Clinton said afterwards that it was Ehud Barak that was unreasonable. So you can go back and look that up. And Clinton was greatly frustrated by the Israelis. And I get Barak's position. He's like, look, I have all of the power. I can oppress these people to the end of time. America's never going to do anything about it. The United Nations might complain, but they're never actually going to do anything about it. So, and I'll just keep taking their land. And that's exactly what Israel did. So you can blame Arafat for not taking that deal. But then if you're going to do that, then why doesn't Israel offer that same exact deal today? And the reality is, one, they won't, because the right-wing government, not everyone in Israel, but the right-wing government of Israel, and yes, the Israeli people constantly re-elect them. So whenever the Palestinians support Hamas, or you see a poll where the Palestinians say, yeah, I want to do violence against the guy who's doing violence against me, and has been for 56 years, everybody goes, you see, the Palestinians are terrorists. But when Israel has poll after poll and election after election, and they keep electing people who want to maintain the occupation, who do not want peace, who want to permanently humiliate the Palestinians, we never say the Israelis are at fault. So why the dichotomy? I would say do not blame the civilians either way, but I would ask the Israeli civilians, get back towards governments that will offer peace. And my guess is there's no way in the world, first of all, not my guess, Netanyahu and no one in that insanely radical right-wing war hawk, war crime riddled cabinet would ever offer any peace deal, even one that's absurdly stacked in Israel's favor. But if you got a new government, my guess even that the new government would never go back and offer the same deal as they had in the David Accords in 2000, because they think, no, now we moved in 750,000 settlers. illegally into the West Bank. So we'd like to steal more and more Palestinian land. And then we all wonder why the Palestinians are frustrated. And I want everyone in the audience to just think about it. If it's you, if someone came and took 78% of your land and then occupied you for 56 years, honestly, what would you do? And by the way, if you flip it and you say, oh, well, if you think that's not that big a deal, why don't we give 78% of Israel to the Palestinians and occupy the Israelis, and then say it's the Israelis' fault for not getting to a peace deal, or pressure them, now you do the peace deal. Now we took your land, you do the peace deal. You would never flip it. The Israelis would never, ever countenance that, because it's grossly unfair.
Okay, so let's go. I think it's probably important to focus on the first point, which is about occupation. So if Destiny, if you believe that Israel do occupy, you say sort of, but basically you say it occupies Gaza, can you understand Cenk's point, which is if someone's occupying you, then you will fight back?
I mean, the occupation, it's important to talk about the occupation, but there are so many weird rewritings that we do in history to try to make this occupation sound like something way different than it actually is. And I've noticed that this is basically mutated and infected the common lexicon without anybody even really understanding what we're saying. Even the initial statement of if I take 78% of your house and then I say to you, blah, 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 what house? There was no house there that was owned by any particular group of people. The Ottoman Empire collapsed in World War I, and Britain and France had mandates to administer to territories and eventually trade these territories over to people there once those mandates expired. That was how most of the Middle East was essentially cut up, and Palestine is no exception there, or Palestine and Israel. When we talk about occupying territory from the Palestinians and how we're shifting blame away from other Arab countries when it's Israel that was occupying the territories, it seems like we feel very strongly about going back to the 67 borders. Well, what were the 67 borders? The 67 borders didn't have a Palestine. The 67 borders had, surprise, the West Bank being occupied by then country Transjordan, and the Gaza Strip being occupied by Egypt. None of these places were ran by Palestinians. There were no Palestinian governments. The Palestinians in the West Bank immediately declared themselves allegiant to the Jordanian king, and that's why 2/3 of Jordan today are Palestinians. And the Gaza Strip had a puppet government set up for, I think, about a year that was eventually brought back into Cairo and then dissolved immediately as Egypt ran the Gaza Strip. It's very interesting that there are all of these calls to go back to the 67 borders and the 67 borders. Why not the 47 partition plan? That was something that the entire United Nations also agreed on. And people will say, well, it's not fair to give that much land when only, some percentage of the people there were Israelis. Well, the difference is that the land that was going to be partitioned to the Palestinians was going to be 98% Arab. The land that was going to be allotted to the Jewish people was 55% Jewish. So it's not going to be a 50-50 split because there's still a huge Arab minority that ends up living on those lands. When we talk about how the other Arab states, saying that they have an obligation to help the Palestinians is just shifting the blame as well, that's not true. They don't just... It's not about shifting the blame. It's about assigning some blame that rightfully belongs there. Palestinian refugees are a very unique place in the world right now, where after the Arab League did, I believe it was Resolution 1457, the Arab League has decided that no countries surrounding Israel are to give citizenship to any Palestinian. That's why they live on these refugee camps on the borders for decades. It's because the Arabs have explicitly decided we will not give citizenship or resettle any of the Palestinians living here so that we can continue this indefinite struggle and fight against the enemy of Israel. It's why the UN RWA has no obligation even to resettle Palestinian refugees. All they do is they provide services. That's why every single year we hear this number touted out over and over again, 4 million, 5 million, 6 million refugees. Of course the refugee number continues to grow, and it leads everybody to think that even more and more are getting kicked out, but that's not true. You can be a Palestinian that lived in Lebanon, moved to the United States, and then adopted a child, and that child can have a kid, and that adopted child's child is considered a Palestinian refugee. It's an insane circumstance, and all it does is to foment this antagonistic attitude towards Israel. So I wouldn't say that the Arab states have necessarily an obligation to solve this crisis for Israel. A lot of it is Israel's fault, I would agree. However, they certainly don't help, and I think it could be made a strong argument that they're intentionally antagonistic when it comes to fomenting desire to fight with Israel from these Palestinian people. When you say, also real quick, when you say once you do peace deals, Palestinians become more moderate, that is also not true. It is true that the 93 Oslo Accords ended the first intifada, but the failure of Camp David to actually reach a peace deal led to the second intifada, which was probably one of the largest radicalization events in recent Israeli history. It's what it's big historians like Benny Morris ended up changing their mind on, will a two-state solution even be workable? Because after seeing the violence that exploded across Israel from even Israeli Arabs, Israeli Palestinian Arabs, people were like, holy shit, maybe these people actually never do want peace.
Come on. Come on.
Oh, and then also, just on the final one, you said Israel is 2,000 times stronger than you. America is 2 million times stronger than you. This is another disingenuous argument. The argument has never been Israel versus Palestine. That is ahistorical. Israel is not worried about Palestine. In the past, Israel was worried about the united front of Egypt, Jordan, Syria, and Lebanon going to war with it over and over and over again in 48, in 56, in 67, and in 73. And then after that, now the worry is Iran is pursuing nuclear weapons. Now the worry is Iran and Turkey and Qatar are funding extremists in the Gaza Strip that are doing terrorist attacks. Now the worry is what kind of weapons are Hezbollah and the Houthis going to get as they hijack ships and launch missiles in. So yeah, I mean, I agree that Israel's not under the same threat that it was in the past, but to pretend like there's no threat today, or it's literally just Israel versus the Palestinians, where do you think Palestinians get their weapons from? They don't have manufacturing plants in the Gaza Strip for AK-47s as much as they might like to divert funds to it.
No, wait, so just before I go to Jenk, I just want to push you on what Jenk's, Destiny, I just want to push you on what Jenk said. Do you think that if Israel is occupying Gaza, don't you understand that the people in Gaza will fight back?
I mean, if that's the case, then we have an immovable. I don't believe that's the case. I think that is the truly racist position, that people in Gaza are somehow genetically obligated to support an Islamic Sunni fundamentalist group that is going to spend every waking second digging up old water pipes and shooting rockets indiscriminately into Israel. I don't believe the Palestinian people there are obligated to that forever. I think Iran needs to stop, and I think that the support from extremist groups need to stop, and I think that the Palestinian people living in Gaza can also stop. We don't need to launch rockets every single day, okay? You can't complain about a lack of fuel for your hospitals when you're shooting thousands of rockets off into civilian neighborhoods in Israel. That just can't be the case. I think that a better job can be done there, and I think it's gonna be really hard to convince Israel, like, hey, listen, I know, whoa, wait. Look at me over here, okay? Don't look at all the rockets that are coming, again, you know, for the 5 millionth day in a row, okay? We need to stop embargoing them and do peace, and like, oh, I don't know if that was a bird or another paraglider coming over here to murder our civilians. But yeah, we need to basically unlock that whole property and let them at peace. And I think that they'll chill like immediately, when the entire history of these regions has never been peaceful. It just has never happened yet. So I think we should give peace a chance.
Jenk, I think you've got a chance to respond there, but he said it's racist. What's your response to all of this?
Yeah, I honestly think he's lost the thread in the. Sorry, Destiny, but a lot of the things you're saying don't make any sense. First, you say that there are no Palestinians, that there was no house to divide, and that the Palestinian people didn't even exist. So what's the big deal about taking that land? No, they drove tons of Palestinians from their lands, from their villages. They killed them. So, and they didn't run from their homes because things were going great and the Israelis had come to give them a hug. Okay, no, you're seeing things that are so absurd that I know the Israeli side now believes it like a religion. Like, oh no, there was no one on that land, and we just walked into the fields, and it was just all us, and we declared it an open field, a Jewish state, and the Palestinians panicked for no reason. Those dastardly, non-existing people then attacked us for no reason. Come on, nobody believes that. Outside of the Israeli position, and the whole world thinks, no, obviously you came and took their land, and that's why they fought you. And then at the one time you say that there is no such thing as a Palestine, no such thing as Palestinians, and then you turn around and you say that no matter where Palestinians go, they're unreasonable, radical, terrorist, and violent. So which one is it? Do they exist or don't they exist? Was no big deal to take their lands and their homes because they weren't a people anyway? Or they are a people, and go, boy, I'm not racist.
Why is Chang such a fucking idiot?
Those guys are violent wherever they go. They're terrorists wherever they go.
Such a fucking idiot.
And then you keep talking about how they're attacking Israel as if it's Norway and Sweden, and the Norwegians are randomly violent guys who just attack Sweden for no reason at all.
Our link to the mainland.
They're under occupation. Look, you keep making it seem like it's the Palestinians that are driving this issue, when you've never answered the question. I've asked it. Ellie's asked it, and look, there's a giant gun on the wall behind you. You could pretend that the Israelis never took any Palestinian land, but no one believes you. I mean, we have eyes. Of course they took Palestinian land. Of course 5 million Palestinians are occupied right now. And my guess, Destiny, is based on everything you've ever said in your life, based on all the paraphernalia you have, based on how much you love guns and fighting back and all that stuff, that if they came and took 78% of your land or 50% of your land or even 5% of your house, then you'd grab that gun behind you in the wall and you'd try to murder them. And you would say that it was self-defense. But when Palestinians do anything at all, that terrorists, radicals, they had it coming, occupying them for longer. It's their fault. And then when you say, oh, well, why don't the other Arab states take them? As if they're all the same. But wait a minute, that's ethnic cleansing. That's driving 5 million people from where they live today. Get out of your house. Who cares about your house? Who cares about your land? And why don't I just drive you into Jordan or drive you into Syria? That's literally the definition of ethnic cleansing. Last thing. Look, the Turkish-Syrian border is an interesting example. After the World War I, they did arbitrary borders, and my family lived near the Syrian border on the Turkish side, and some of my grandfather's land got stuck on the Syrian side, and that sucks. And there were Turks on the Syrian side, there were Arabs on the Turkish side, and that was unjust. But overall, nobody was getting oppressed. They had their own countries, and they went back and forth, and it was fine. But during recent conflicts, Turkey did an incursion into northern Syria. Now the situation is completely different. And when Turkey was occupying that for a short period of time, I said Turks have to withdraw immediately. It doesn't matter that the lines were arbitrary before. You cannot occupy those people. You must move back. And luckily they did, okay? But that's the difference, okay? You can't just say, well, I don't know, it was all arbitrary in the first place. The Ottoman Empire used to control it. So we just took a whole bunch of it. We drove people from their homes, and then we occupied them for 56 years. But there are no Palestinians, and they should never fight back, and they should just be occupied. That's just totally unreasonable.
Destiny, I mean, there's some points to respond to, but I'm going to push back on I'm going to push the question that Cenk and I both have asked you.
Yeah, what's the question? He said I'd never answered a question, but I didn't hear what the question was. What about
You've got the gun behind you.
What?
If someone came and took some of your land, we can argue about the percentage. Occupied you and said, okay, now look, I'm giving you 22% of your own home, but you're imprisoned there. Would you grab that gun and do something about it? Or will you say, yes, sir, I will accept my occupation and I will accept any peace deal you give me, sir. You are right, sir. And I love you, sir. I do not hate you. I love you.
I would take my gun and I would fight to the death to protect my land.
Okay, great.
But that's not what we're talking about here, Cenk.
Oh, of course.
You're talking about your great-grandfather losing his house, grabbing a shotgun, and then going to kill people that live there that weren't even alive when he lost it. We need to understand that what we're talking about here isn't an occupation that started yesterday or 5 years ago or even 30 years ago. We're talking about a conflict that started arguably in 1881, escalated heavily in the early 1900s, and then exploded it from 47 to 49, essentially, when the Civil War and then the War of Independence started, right? If you're making a mistake to assume that I think that in 48, when all the surrounding Arab states declared war against Israel, which I notice is something that's always left out when we talk about the Nakba and we talk about the expulsion of Arabs from Jewish land, because remember, when the Israelis accepted that 47 partition agreement, they accepted that agreement with 45% of their population being Arabs. They said we were A-okay with it. The surrounding Arabs said, no, we're going to actually ethnically cleanse you and we're going to kick you all out of here. That's what the Arab states wanted back then. The Jewish people fought, they won, and now we're dealing with the consequences of that ever since. But let's not confuse the history here. The Jewish people were not just randomly expelling 711,000 people from their lands. It was in response to all of the surrounding Arabs attempting to, I'll say ethnically cleanse instead of genocide, which might have had, we'll say ethnically cleanse to be nice, okay? So that's the important thing. If you ask me about the 48 war, though, and you say, Destiny, do you think that it was okay that all the Arabs tried to defeat the Jewish people in that point of time? I actually think it's totally within reason. I think in 48, if they would have ethnically cleansed all the Jews out of there, the Europeans essentially came in, I would have been like, yeah, I totally get it. They came in, they bought land from large swaths of owners that expelled a lot of tenant farmers. It feels like they came in under the sanction of the British, kind of true, kind of not. I think I can understand the fighting in 48. I can even understand the fighting in 67, but we have to acknowledge that at some point in time, the fighting has to stop. And we're not talking about protecting our house today. We're talking about going to our great-grandfather's house and killing the people that live there now, and that just can't be the rules for the world. It can't be that Russia is allowed to invade Crimea because Crimea happens to be mostly ethnically Russian, because prior to 91 and in the early 1900s in the Holodomor, a ton of Russians moved in ethnically and now settled that area. That can't be the way that it works. At some point, we have to say, all right, we fought, we lost, and now we have to figure out what are the rules going forward, because with what you're saying now, that they have a right to fight against their occupation, The people that use that ideology, those people aren't fighting for a two-state solution. Those people are fighting for a one-state solution. When they talk about the occupiers, they're not talking about the fence around Gaza, and they're not talking about the settlers in the West Bank. They're not talking about the settlements in Hebron. They're talking about all of Israel. Those are the occupiers. So at some point, we need to say, listen, we had a righteous cause, and unfortunately, we lost. Same as Ukraine and Russia today. If Russia manages to hold Crimea and their land bridge, and they peel off the Donbass, and they peel off Crimea, you know what? It sucks, but unfortunately, at some point, you just say, all right, the fighting stops. 100 years from now, Ukraine can't reinvade that peninsula. They can't reinvade those regions. That's just unfortunately the way that it works, unless we want to justify either one, infinite conflict, or two, tell Israel, listen, Israel, since these guys are basically infinitely justified to fight you, you kind of have to either cleanse all of them or genocide them, because those are the only options that you're leaving on the table when you make those kinds of statements.
Cenk, just before you respond, just keep in mind that we've done 45 minutes over one question, so if you're able to do a bit of a shorter response so we can move on to other questions, that would be fine.
Yeah, so there's actually a couple things I agree with Destiny on there. So first of all, let me start with one disagreement. You say these people, they want all of Israel. Yeah, and there's a lot of people in Israel that want greater Israel, eretz Israel, from the river to the sea, and drive the Palestinians into the sea. We have to ignore both of those sides if we're ever going to get to peace. We have to find the partners for peace on both sides. And are there partners on the Palestinian side who would take a two-state solution? Definitely. Mahmoud Abbas would take it tomorrow. And so you could take the most extreme Palestinian and pretend that all Palestinians are on that side. And of course, under occupation, it leads to more extremism. And you can take the most extreme Israeli position and say all Israelis are on that side, but it's not true. There are plenty of people who can make peace deals on both sides. And then, but I do agree that the right of return is gone. And so if you're a Palestinian and that breaks your heart that you're not going to be able to get back your home from after the Nakba in 1948, I'm sorry, I love you, and I wish that hadn't happened to you, but you're not going to get it back. It has to be two states, otherwise it's going to be endless war. So we've got to separate, no question about it. It's also absurd to say, oh, that's ancestral Jewish land, which goes to the point that Destiny was making, which is, yeah, I mean, I could say that it's all ancestral Ottoman land. Give it all back to the Turks. There's no end to that. So I don't care about your voodoo about, oh no, my voodoo says it's my land and my voodoo says it's my land. I don't care about either one of your voodoos. Don't care at all. I just want to get the peace, two-state solution, roughly 1967 borders, and again, Destiny, you agreed that you would resort to violence and you'd resort to violence immediately. So, well, that's what happened in 48, and you said that makes sense to you. 67, you said that makes sense to you. And right now, it's not theoretical. It's not about right of return. That may be for some Palestinians. But right now, their number one concern by far and away is the current occupation. So you've agreed that you would fight back in 48 if you were Palestinian in 67. So, well, they're being occupied today. There's daily humiliations and mass murder. So would you fight back if you were a Palestinian today living under the occupation?
Today it can't be fighting. It can't be Hamas. From a moral point of view, killing civilians is almost impossible to justify, bordering on impossible, maybe impossible. So supporting a terrorist group is almost never going to be the answer, number one. And then number two, from a pragmatic point of view, it just makes everybody hate you. Like it hurts your ability to pursue any sort of peaceful agreement. There's a reason why the ANC had the tactics that they did, and they tried not to kill civilians, and that wasn't their explicit goal. There's a reason why MLK's thoughts prevailed over Malcolm X's thoughts, and why the largely advocacy of nonviolent movements were the ones that brought about civil rights. Is the reason why a lot of the BLM stuff became unpopular, because the rioting and the violence turned people against that movement. The Palestinians, I think it's possible they have to see the same thing, that like, okay, well, listen, this sucks and the occupation is unfair, which is fine. And to some extent, I can agree with that. If you live in Gaza, holy shit, your life sucks, right? Half your population are basically children. You have shitty access to water. You have, electricity that only lasts for so many hours a day. There's a lot of living conditions that suck there. But the answer can't be like, I'm going to drink a little bit less today because I'm going to fire one more rocket over at Israel and expect that something is going to change at some point in time. That cannot be the path that they're on. And I feel like the rest of the world has taken the place of the prior Arab states now and hyping those Palestinians up into thinking that, like, well, listen, if you guys just keep fighting, like, eventually Israel's going to come to the table and form a two-state solution. Just so everybody understands that's listening to this, if you want a two-state solution, the worst thing that you can do is encourage Palestinians to fight, because right now, all Israel is going to do is they're going to say, look at what happened on October 7th. Kind of looks like the Holocaust, huh? Makes us feel pretty bad. And while they say that, and while they push into Gaza, and while they destroy that, and we're up to almost, 19,000? Probably over 20,000 deaths once we get through the rubble and everything, right? Well, what's happening in the West Bank? Well, Israel is expanding their settlements. They're probably getting ready to annex Area C. They're continuing to shore up their demographic majority over there. All that's happening is Palestinians are losing more and more and more and more and more over time. Somebody has to be talking to the Palestinians. In the past, it was Saudi Arabia, it was Egypt, it was Jordan. I think they've given up on it, right? Now the only people that whispers into the ears of the Palestinians are Iran, and then their terrorist wings, basically. Somebody has to tell the Palestinians, it's time to stop fighting, it's time to chill the f*** out, and it's time to come to the table and legitimately try to negotiate a two-state solution. And unfortunately, whatever Abbas thinks is kind of irrelevant, because I'm pretty sure if you were to do a democratic election, Abbas's support would be in the negative numbers. So somebody has to be willing to voice to the Palestinian people, or lead the Palestinian people in a way that they just haven't had that leadership in the past. Because holy shit, it hasn't been Abbas, and it has not been Arafat that have done it effectively in a way that's pursuing peace.
Wait, so let me just go on to the next question, just because we need to move on. You mentioned about civilian casualties, which is actually an amazing segue onto the next point. So can we agree, or at least I'd love to hear your perspective on this, that Israel's actions since October the 7th, from how they've retaliated against Gaza and against Hamas, as you mentioned, there's probably around 19,000 casualties at this point, 20,000 casualties at this point. Can we agree that at worst, that's a genocide? And at best, that's an army that doesn't care enough about Palestinian lives? Destiny.
Are we saying that because of the October 7th, or I'm sorry, because of the incursions into Gaza, Israel doesn't care about Palestinian lives? Is that essentially the question?
No, the question of how they've reacted since then, of all the civilian casualties have been. I mean, even for example, that they killed accidentally 3 hostages of their own hostages. I mean, doesn't that say something?
I mean, what does it say? I think
who are holding white flags.
So here are issues that I have with Israel and the IDF, okay? One, here are some broad issues, and then I'll focus it more into Gaza, okay? So one is settler violence seems to be really hard for the IDF to account for in the West Bank, okay? There are settlers that will kill people in the West Bank, that will kill Palestinians, that either it goes unanswered, or the punishments are suspect, as in they probably should be higher. And then you also see a lot of antagonism towards people in the West Bank, including from the IDF. These are bad things that need to be rectified, okay, when you look in the West Bank. When you look in the Gaza Strip, the civilian casualty count is high, and there are actions that happen that I think we should ask questions about. So my understanding is, I don't think anything else has come out, for those 3 hostages that came out, they were shirtless and they were waving a white flag on a stick, okay? How these 3 people end up getting killed by the IDF, not only is that unacceptable, obviously, should also make you question, well, if that happened and those were hostages, have there been other instances of the IDF shooting people that also were presenting similarly in conditions where they were clearly or obviously not a threat? That being said, while these incidents do happen and they're horrible, something that we need to keep in mind is that we have an unprecedented view into the day-to-day ongoings of military conflict that we have never had in the past. I am sure that we've seen it happen on the Ukrainian side and the Russian side, where civilians or soldiers that seem to have surrendered or that aren't threats are being killed, either by drones, either by soldiers, either by grenades. We are having an unprecedented look into military conflict on the day-to-day. To assume that this is like magnitudes worse than ever it has been, or that military conflict was historically, is probably not true. That doesn't excuse any of the actions, of course. It should always come under review. There should be other people that are investigating potential war crimes, whether that's Israel being forced to evaluate, or third-party people like Amnesty International or the UN Human Rights Watch evaluating it. Like, all of these things, I think the more eyes on this, the better, okay? 1, 2. However, a couple other things. One, I don't like the term indiscriminate killing because, one, if it was truly indiscriminate and there were truly carpet bombing runs, Dresden saw 50,000 people evaporated in like 24 hours, okay? The Tokyo bombing saw more people disintegrated than Hiroshima and Nagasaki combined when it came to bombing. That's what indiscriminate bombing looks like, and both of those areas were far less densely populated than the Gaza Strip. We need to be asking questions about how do we deal with Hamas in a way that limits civilian casualties, but doesn't just let Hamas get off scot-free. That cannot be the answer. I agree that the civilian casualty count is high, even if I accept that Israel is saying it is killing Hamas terrorists. I think they've said, what, 5,000? That still leaves 10,000 plus civilians that have been killed by Israeli munitions. It's not good, but the answer cannot be ceasefire, 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 where Hamas remains in power. That's unbelievably unacceptable, and I think it shows an insane inability to empathize with the Israeli side here that just got essentially 9/11, a month and a half ago.
Oh, wait, so let me actually push you on the question I actually asked. Do you think Israel care enough about Palestinian lives?
Do I think they care enough about them? I would lean like 51-49 yes. The issue is that I don't have insight into the decisions that are being made in Israeli command when it comes to choosing targets. It could be the case that tomorrow, let's say a huge commission is ran and you find out that the IDF is looking at a target, they're saying, there was a Hamas in here 7 days ago, let's fucking bomb it. And they blow up an entire apartment complex and 40, 50, 60 civilians die. That's not acceptable. It could be the case that we see in a lot of targets, there's Hamas operating out of here, we've dropped leaflets, we know that they use this for command, we've done everything we can, we're gonna bomb it, they bomb it, 20, 30 civilians are killed. I'd say in that sense, they did essentially what they could. I don't know what the alternatives here are. I'd love to hear them if there are any, because it seems like the only thing people say is ceasefire and peace, which cannot happen with Hamas. So yeah, I would lean towards, just on the numbers that I've seen so far and everything, it seems like Israel is considering civilian casualties, as much as people want to say they aren't, but I can't truly give you an honest answer to that without understanding the decisions that are being made within the Israeli military, because that could go either way.
Cenk, there's a lot to respond to.
Yeah. So I'm going to go back to the earlier question just for 1 second, because I don't want to be misunderstood. I actually agree with Destiny that the Palestinians should reject terrorism. I don't think it's a moral or productive pathway to peace. I don't think it's the right way to go at all. The reason I object is because I just don't want Palestinians characterized as some sort of violent, savage terrorists wherever they go, as if it's just out of whole cloth. There's nothing we can do about them. We just have to occupy them forever because of these violent savages. No, they're fighting back in a way that is counterproductive and not the right way to fight back. But I can understand why, and I think any human being, and it seems like even Destiny can understand why you would fight back if you were under occupation or someone took your land, your home, etc. And the Palestinian Authority, and this is going to come back to this question at the end, did actually do the right path. They went to the UN and asked for a state just like Israel did. And Israel called it terrorism, because Israel calls everything terrorism. Even if the most diplomatic, peaceful path there is, and Netanyahu was screaming bloody murder about it. Anti-Semitic, terror, it makes no sense at all. And they do it anyway because he doesn't want peace. And he said it many times, and now the Israeli ambassadors are saying it publicly. They don't want peace. They just want to grab that land. The occupation is not an accident for 56 years. It's because they wanted to do it. Okay, so now on to the question of how they've been acting since October 7th in their destruction of Gaza. So this is not like, oh my God, we were trying to avoid civilian casualties, but golly gee, the IDF has the worst aim in the world. It's just a totally incompetent military that accidentally kills tens of thousands of civilians. No, they're dropping 2,000, let's talk facts. They're dropping 2,000-pound bombs. The U.S. never dropped a bomb larger than 500 pounds in the worst fighting in Iraq. Because in residential areas, we determined, as much as although our invasion of Iraq was awful and horrific and hundreds of thousands of civilians died eventually through the conflict and killings on both sides. But even in that horrific situation, we thought, well, you can't go more than 500 pounds in a residential area. That's just indiscriminate murder of civilians. Israel's going 2,000-pound bombs on top of residential buildings. Now, New York Times just had a story about how a lot of the bombs that they're dropping, nearly half, about 45%, are what's called dumb bombs. They're not even precision guided. They're just dropping them in the middle of a residential city, and they're barely aiming. And then the third fact is that we've seen, because of the IDF videos, the tunnels that Hamas has. It looks like they are largely totally intact. And even Netanyahu in an interview said, once we started the ground invasion, we finally started to do some damage to Hamas. Oh, so the 29,000 bombs that you dropped in an area the size of Las Vegas, you basically just implied and admitted that they didn't work at all in getting Hamas. Hamas is in the tunnels are totally unaffected. And you knew that. But they're still dropping bombs on civilians. And so now they're not only have they killed now at a bare minimum about 10 to 15 times the number of civilians that Hamas did, making them 10 to 15 times worse terrorists. Let's be clear about our definitions. If you murder civilians and you're a Palestinian, you're called a terrorist. When you murder civilians and you're Israel, you're called a wonderful ally and a democratic nation who just keeps missing with all their 2,000-pound bombs as they drop 29,000 of them. No, they're murdering civilians. Every bomb dropped on Gaza is an act of terrorism. No ands, ifs, or buts. But even if you take the ridiculous, absurd IDF numbers, and everyone knows that IDF, almost every statement they put out is propaganda. They're in the middle of war. I get it. Both sides do propaganda. But if you take their outlandish number of 5,000, they've shown almost no Hamas fighters. They showed like one pair of boots and a couple of flak jackets. They have all of the capability of showing evidence, pictures, videos, etc. They've shown almost no dead Hamas fighters. But okay, let's say the 5,000 is real. It's hilarious, totally not. But okay, even if you granted that, over 19,000 dead now. When Hamas invaded Israel on October 7th, all the things they did were horrific, but they killed about 373 soldiers, and the rest, about 800 or so, were civilians. And I condemn that incredibly forcefully. Definitely the wrong way to go, definitely immoral, definitely terrible. But Hamas's ratio is still better than Israel's ratio, let alone the raw numbers. So if Israel is killing 10 to 20 times more civilians, and their ratio of civilians to Hamas fighters, even by the best numbers that they give, is still worse than Hamas, well, who's the bigger terrorist? I actually don't think that there's any factual question about that at all. There might be an emotional reaction you have. No way. I love Israel. They can't be terrorists. I hate the Palestinians. They're obviously terrorists. But the numbers indicate that Israel is doing far more terrorism. And by the way, they're doing far more terrorism against the people they occupy and oppress already. Okay, whereas the Palestinians are fighting back in a misguided way, but that's the reality of the situation. And this whole idea of Hamas remains, so we have to keep murdering Palestinian civilians. And guys, again, we have eyes. We can see the babies. We can see their body parts being pulled out of the rubble. We can see that 9,000 children have died. My heart broke, and I was very adamant on air about how terrible the Hamas attack was on October 7th. My heart broke for those 37 kids killed in Israel. 36 kids killed in Israel. 9,000 kids killed in Gaza. The idea that Israel is not doing terrorism,
are you fucking kidding me right now?
That Israel is not being absurdly brutal in their destruction of Gaza just doesn't pass any sanity test. Because the whole world can see Gaza is absolutely destroyed and their civilians are being butchered. We all got eyes, we all have ears. And finally, this is really important. What is an alternative to the impossible standard of Hamas has to surrender? I mean, that's such an absurd thought. Like, Hamas that's perfectly fine in the tunnels is going to come out and go, okay, we waved the white flag. We're right here, Israel. Bomb right here. Kill us. We surrender. It's not a thing that's ever going to happen. It's a purposely impossible standard. So that finally gets to, well, then how the hell do we resolve this? Here's what you do. If you actually want peace, Israel would go to the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank, and they would say,
"That's so stupid, man. What a fucking faggot-ass game. I'm actually gonna die now because of that. That's so fucking trash. Just kill me. I'm so fucking annoyed. I'm so fucking annoyed that that happened.
I'm not even talking 1967.
What a fucking faggot-ass game.
Okay?
That dumbass shit right fucking there is why I don't play it hardcore. And it's because that fucking faggot pulled that fucking mob on top of me and he just randomly shoots fucking water out of his dick hole and it knocks me off the cliff.
That is something that
fucking stupid.
If Israel chose to go in that direction,
that's some dumbass shit. Anyone who takes hardcore serious, you're a fucking weirdo.
Defeated, we do get to a two-state solution, and that's completely in Israel's hands. But instead, they're choosing
that was so fucking annoying that just happened.
Infinite bombing campaign where they're going to continue.
And of course, I don't have Fang Death or anything like that yet.
Tens of thousands
so
of
fucking
Palestinian
stupid.
civilians. Any defense of it is absurd and morally indefensible.
Jenka, I just want to push you on two of the things that you said. Number one is about proportionality, or comparing what Hamas did to what Israel is doing. Why does that matter? I mean, if you really want to compare, well, are you going to say that Israel should go in and rape women? Or
the more annoying part is I'm almost, the only other thing I could think of I could have done right there is maybe dismiss my pet and resummon him, but I don't think it works that way. It needs to be in line of sight, and it was too far away, I think.
So how can you criticize them and say it's
so
really,
fucking stupid, man.
Terrible and not actually getting the results they want when you don't really know what they're trying to do in the whole.
God damn it! When you fucking die in this game, it's so fucking unforgiving. Holy fucking shit!
In terms of
This walk back to my body, like,
etc., killing babies, I condemn it 1,000,000,000%. What's so incredibly dumb, let alone deeply immoral, okay, and terribly counterproductive to the Palestinian cause, let alone those poor Israeli civilians who were killed. Now, is it better when Israel drops a 2,000-pound bomb, and in that residential building, 3 babies' heads are crushed and their brains are splattered across the floor? The bombs light a couple of grandmothers on fire and they die in a fiery death. Moms, aunts, uncles, etc. Israel incinerates them alive and then goes, no, you see how much better I am than Hamas? Because I dropped a bomb and it looks like a video game. So I'm good, I didn't do it with my bare hands. No, that is not any better morally. And when you kill 20 times as many people, it's definitely not better morally. And in terms of IDF's intent, no, you're right, I'm not a mind reader, I don't know what their intent is, but I know what their actions are, and actions show intent. So when Hamas did the October 7th attack, was their intent to cause damage to civilians and to cause psychic damage and to terrorize Israel? Yes, you could tell their intent by their actions. So when the IDF drops bombs on residential areas, murders 19,000 people, even if you take the IDF numbers, 5,000 Hamas fighters, and murders 14,000 civilians, you can't then come back and go, and drops dumb bombs, 29,000 of them in an area the size of Las Vegas, and they're 2,000-pound bombs, and then go, oh golly gee, did I murder all those civilians with my gigantic bombs that I dropped indiscriminately in Gaza? I have the purest intent. I just have the world's worst military. No one believes that.
Destiny, there's a lot to respond to that.
Yeah, almost every single thing said is ridiculous. So starting at the beginning, so when we say it is, you can stop me if you disagree with anything I say. Okay, I can go through all of these at one point in time, or all of these point by point. When we say that Palestinians can't be viewed as violent savages, I absolutely agree with that. That is 100% true. But it's equally dishonest and possibly even more harmful to pretend that it is a population of doves that just has a few bad apples. That is not true. The entirety of the Palestinian population, why are you shaking your...
the Israeli population? You should stop me anytime.
Sure.
So the Israeli population...
Wait, can I ask one quick question?
Murder. Keep murdering them. You haven't murdered enough Palestinian children yet. Now, I don't believe that. That's why I think it's a bad way to go.
Can you tell me a 5-year period?
I don't want to blame the Palestinian civilians. And there are no doves on either side because they're in the middle of the war.
That's not what we're talking about. Can you give me a 2-year period from 2006 onwards where rockets haven't poured into Israel from the Gaza Strip?
Can you give me a 2-year period where they weren't brutally occupied, where we're going to pretend that, like, oh my God, why are they firing rockets?
I mean, they weren't occupied before Hamas took over, coup d'etat, kicked them out, and then started launching attacks into Israel in 2006. After Israel's they unilaterally withdrew all the settlements in 2005. Prior to that, there was no occupation, there was no blockade, there was nothing like that. It was the second intifada that saw weapons being shipped in from Turkey and Iran that caused Israel to say, well, you know what? If these guys are gonna be shipping in money, arms, terrorist training, tactics, everything from the sea, maybe we need to like close those pathways off. So no, I can tell you easily, prior to 2006, that did not happen for the entire time period from 48 onwards.
So look, Hamas, killed democracy in Gaza
No, that is not true. That is a lie. Hamas did not kill democracy. Hamas won their elections. That is important to understand about the Palestinian people living in Gaza. Hamas won. It was a plurality of the support, but they won support from those people in those elections. They didn't just take over out of nowhere. They had popular support.
Then there were no other elections since then.
Yeah.
Correct, that is true. There weren't. But guess what? There haven't been elections in the West Bank either, have there been? Because Abbas suspended elections too. You know why? Because he wouldn't win any, and he knows it. So it's not even fair to act like Abbas and the PA are doing. I'm sorry, what part of that is not true? Why are you shaking your head?
Yeah, so let me explain all the parts that are.
Go ahead.
So Hamas won the original election, but so did the warmonger Netanyahu. He's won many, many elections, and he's murdered Palestinians endlessly. And the Israeli people are like, "Yay!"
What does that have to do with anything?
Netanyahu again? So
hold on. Who won the election after Netanyahu's first term? Who was the next prime minister? It was Ehud Barak, who pursued one of the most ambitious peace deals ever. The difference between Israel and the difference between the Palestinians is Israeli citizens live in a democracy, and they do push their people towards peace, or they did prior to the Second Intifada. Barak was the prime minister afterwards. He did the Camp David Accords. He hinged his entire prime ministership on getting some sort of peace deal. And guess what? Arafat walked away, didn't even provide a counter deal, and we went right into the Second Intifada, where yes, after that, all we saw was conservative prime ministership after conservative prime ministership. Who's surprised at that?
Okay, so let me finish the thought. So first of all, Hamas won those elections, and for the last quarter of a century or so, bloody.
This is so stupid.
Politicians in Israel that
God, man.
Talk about Amalek and exterminating the Palestinians have won election after election. But I don't think
these guys were not fucking here before. Jesus fucking Christ.
Unfortunately, the more war that has happened, the more both sides have dug in. I just don't want you to blame the Palestinian civilians because of an election that happened in 2007, and they elected the people that they thought were going to fight back on their behalf. So,
that's fine. I'm not trying to blame Palestinian civilians.
Hold on, Destiny.
Okay, because I had like 7 other things you said that I want to respond to, but go ahead.
Okay, hold on. Let me finish. So if you say, because that is a very dangerous line of thought. If you say the Palestinians are all guilty because of an election they had now 16 years ago, that makes the Israelis infinitely more guilty for electing Netanyahu. And I don't want to go in that direction because that leads to terrorism and civilian deaths. Let's just get to the right solution. Now, in terms of why I said...
Well, wait, let me hold on, real quick. Let me respond to that point, okay? No, that's not dangerous. It's realistic. We have to look at what the people want. When you tell me the Israeli people have Netanyahu as their leader, that's true. And Israel lives in a democracy, and the right elements of that country were gaining a lot of power. That's important to recognize because it shows you what the appetite is for the Israeli people for a negotiated two-state solution. As the terror attacks from Palestinians increase, the appetite for that decreases. So if you wanted to apply the same lens of analysis to the Israeli people as I'm applying to the Palestinian ones, I would say absolutely. I would say in the year 2000, I would say in 93 with Rabin, with Barak, that you did have an appetite for peace, for a negotiated two-state solution. I would say that as the conservative element grows stronger, the Israeli population doesn't support it as much. And you can hold them a bit more responsible depending on who they elect for leadership. That's how democracies work.
But then, wait a minute, that seems like you're advocating for terrorism against Israel.
I'm not advocating for terrorism. I'm saying we have to have an honest conversation about what people on the ground believe and stop walking around like people in America who are like, oh, well, all the Palestinians just want peace and they just want to be blah, blah. No, they don't. They want to fight. All the polling data shows that they want to fight. All of the historical actions show they want to fight. All of the leadership they've had shows that they want to fight. And it makes sense historically for why they want to. We both agree that in 48, they had probably the moral authority to fight. They had it in 67. Maybe they even still had it in 73. To have a people who's had a moral authority to fight for 50 years, to suddenly lose it is pretty hard. But we have to be able to engage honestly with that conversation, because if we walk into, even though what you just said, if we give, here's what you're saying, we give Abbas, we negotiate a two-state solution, which by the way will never happen right now after October 7th, and we give them the 67 borders, which by the way will never happen because Israel's biggest fear is if they show weakness, it means they make concessions, and that's probably what inspired part of the Second Intifada and Hamas, is because after Israel withdrew from Lebanon, after the failure of that 15-year occupation, and they got no peace from Syria, no peace from Lebanon, it energized all of the Palestinians to fight more, because they said, look, when Israel fails militarily, we get more, right? You think that if they negotiate a two-state solution with Abbas is going to walk into the Gaza Strip and fight and take it back? What is that going to be, a Palestinian civil war? And Abbas doesn't even have the popular support for the Palestinians right now. The PA is already seen as this shitty security subcontractor that essentially works at the behest of Israel. If you look historically at both intifadas, there was like 1,000 Palestinian Authority suspected collaborators killed by other Palestinians. The reality is that right now, now, what the Palestinian people want is they want to fight. That is what they want, and that is what has to be addressed and changed. I'm not saying with terror attacks or with violence or whatever, but that sentiment needs to be addressed. Otherwise, we're not going to get anywhere in terms of peace talks.
So, but the Palestinians, yeah, Cenk, I'll let you.
I've got to address that. So look at these impossible standards and this wild hypocrisy. So the Palestinians are occupied. How dare those sons of bitches fight back? They should just bow their goddamn heads. The Israelis want to keep occupying, keep oppressing, keep killing Palestinians, but they're perfectly innocent. So no one actually says the Palestinians are all doves and no one wants to fight back. They say they should, like someone like me says they shouldn't do the terrorism. It's counterproductive and immoral. But I understand why they're doing it, because that's what happens in every situation where people are oppressed, etc. They try to fight back with whatever little power that they have. That's why the Japanese started doing kamikaze fighters at the end when they were losing. They had less power left, so they would take whatever little power they had and they would drive it to try to knock down and sink American aircraft carriers. Terrorism is an act of powerlessness. So now I'm telling you it's counterproductive. I don't want to go in that direction. But every time we talk about it, you say, no, we can't do peace. After October 7th, we can't end the occupation. That would only reward them. So now you're saying, okay.
What was the, you brought up Japan there. How did Japan get de-radicalized? Yeah, wait, what was the end of Japan's?
Hold on. Okay, now look, we got to get control here. We got to
sure, but I'm just curious, you brought up Japan. How did Japan stop?
Okay. Sorry,
my bad, go ahead, okay.
Yeah.
So you're saying, let's do what is now an indefinite occupation because you were bad boys. Some of you dared to fight back. You were super bad. So we're going to violently oppress you for a couple more decades or whenever the indefinite occupation is over. And if you guys are good boys and girls, and even if you politely ask the United Nations for your nation, we're going to slap you across the face and go, don't you dare fight back. And we're going to occupy you indefinitely, but I don't know why you would ever do violence.
That is such a fucking hyperbolic piece of shit.
You have all the power in the world. You're the one that is occupying them. They are not occupying you. You are the one doing exterminating them. They are always like worried, oh my God, they would kill us all. Yeah, maybe Hamas would, but you're actually killing them all right now. It's not theoretical. We can all see the dead babies. We can all see the dead children and civilians and women. And to have all of that gigantic military might and say, I am never going to stop occupying you. There's nothing you can do, whether it's going to the UN, diplomacy, a peace deal today with the Palestinian Authority, or violence. There's nothing you can do to end this oppression. But I want you to bow your goddamn head and serve me and know that you should be occupied forever. That is not realistic. That is not helpful. That is just one side saying, ha ha, I'm bigger than you. I have more military might than you, and I will oppress you for as long as I like, because if I ever let you be free, like all other human beings on the planet, you are so evil and mean and savage that you might try to kill me, even though I have a military 2,000 times larger than you.
Why did Egypt?
The other side is doing the brutality as we speak.
Yeah, let's get away from the theoretical. What made Egypt sign peace? Hey, yeah, you can let them up.
They were going to get their ass kicked by Israel, and they realized that.
So it was Israel's military might. Why did Jordan sign peace? Why did Jordan
did an amazing job of getting them
so
free to that.
Egypt signed peace because Israel conquered the entire Sinai and was miles from marching into Cairo. Okay? Jordan signed peace with Israel because they were a military might to be reckoned with. The Abraham Accords worked because Israel has an unbelievable economy and they want to trade and they are not interested in fighting. So as Israel has shown strength to enemies in the region, they have said, you know what? We are going to we are going to allow you to exist, and we're going to sign peace agreements with you, and everything's going to work. So that has historically been what Israel's done, and it has seemed to work for Israel. The Palestinians have not said, we're going to sign peace and come to terms with you. We're just going to keep fighting and fighting and fighting. And it seems to be the case that historically, fighting and fighting and fighting over and over again just doesn't seem to work. That's not a winning strategy. And you say, well, it's impossible for people to sign peace with Israel. They're never going to do it. Do you know how humiliated the entire Arab world was humiliated after 67? and nobody wanted to sign peace. After 67, it was the Khartoum Conference where they signed the 3 no's. They said, no recognition, no peace, no direct negotiations, Israel, we're not gonna do anything. And eventually, through their military might, Israel got concessions out of all these people. They gave back the Sinai, they stopped fighting with Jordan, et cetera, et cetera.
That's what I want now.
That's fine, but that started with the other people not fighting anymore. If we were using jank logic, we would say, well, of course Egypt wants to fight Israel forever. They need to take back the Sinai. Of course they want to fight Egypt forever. They don't want to give up part of the control of the Suez Canal. They don't want to give up being able to lock Israel out from the Strait of Tehran. They don't want to give up that entire region where Israel was, by the way, moving settlers in, which they did. Over almost 5,000 settlers had settled in the Sinai from 67 to 79 before peace was signed, and Israel finally gave the Sinai back to Egypt, and then they demolished all the settler camps and brought them in. So military might has worked historically. Not saying that should always be the case, but I'm just saying that when other countries have shown peace, even though Israel was kind of dominating them militarily, peace was found. Real quick, I'm just running through the rest of these. Real quick, okay. When you say Netanyahu doesn't want peace, it doesn't matter what Netanyahu wants. Netanyahu is the prime minister of a democracy. The people want peace, he'll be either tossed or he'll change his opinion accordingly. That's what happened when he was prime minister from 95 to 99. Even though Netanyahu is a far-right lunatic, and he absolutely is, and he should be called out as such. No new settlements were built from 95 to 99. The permits issued for houses being built in settlements were dramatically decreased in the West Bank because as much as Netanyahu didn't like it, there was still popular support for carrying through with the Oslo Accords. Now, the Netanyahu of 2020 wouldn't want it to act the same way, but he had to because he has democratic pressure. So I don't care if Netanyahu wants peace or not. What matters is what the Israeli people want. And as long as rockets and terrorist attacks continue to pour from the Gaza Strip, that's never going to happen. Real quick on the
you need to give Cenk a chance to respond.
Wait. Well, I didn't even respond to any of the other points. I have to get these out because he brought up so many of these random things. Oh shoot! Hold on, I got my door. 1 second. Oh. Okay, sorry. Okay, Jesus, real quick. When we talk about like 2,000-pound bombs, we talk about like the indiscriminate bombing of like the Israeli stuff. There are so many random crazy things that are brought up here. We talk about like Israel's dropping so many bombs, killing so many people. Israel's dropped like 24,000 bombs, okay? They're killing less than 1 bomb per person. If their goal was to kill civilians, they are the worst bombers in literally the entire world,
Does that make a difference how many bombs have dropped?
Of course it makes a difference. If you drop 1 bomb and you kill 50,000 people, you're probably trying to kill a lot of people. If you drop 24,000 bombs and your civilian casualties are less than per bomb drop, it seems like a hard argument to say that they're indiscriminately killing civilians, okay? When we talk about numbers of civilians killed, the numbers aren't important. What's important is the intention. When Israel kills civilians, especially in the course of this war, those civilians are killed as collateral. When Hamas kills civilians, it's because they're targeting them. Hamas's bullets were not accidentally flying into the heads of partygoers looking for IDF soldiers when they breached the walls on October 7th. They were looking to kill civilians, okay? Hamas does not drop pamphlets, make phone calls, knock on roofs, and then wait for an invasion at the behest of the West and the United States to wait for civilians to leave. They just go in and they kill whoever they can find. This idea also of dumb bombs, most bombs are dumb bombs. If you're not firing a guided missile, of course it's a dumb bomb. Just because it's a dumb bomb doesn't mean it's not aimed. You can aim a bomb. Just because it's dumb and it doesn't have a guidance system or any sort of secondary flight system or actual like aiming system doesn't mean that it's a dumb bomb. You drop a bomb from a plane, you know about where it's gonna go. Again, if you didn't, the civilian casualty toll would probably be a lot higher. The idea they're barely aiming them does not seem to be justified at all. When we say the tunnels are totally unaffected, we've literally seen videos of entire apartment things collapsing with like tunnels and shit underneath. Yeah, the tunnels might not have been destroyed as much as they wanted to be. That's why they dropped 2,000-pound bombs. We dropped bunker busters in Afghanistan and Iraq, I believe. It's no surprise that Israel's doing it here to try to destroy tunnels. Every statement that the IDF puts out as propaganda, I guess that's kind of true. You're saying that they should show them capturing Hamas soldiers, but literally every single video or picture Israel puts out either ends up getting re-propagandized. Like, for instance, people say Israel said that there were 40 beheaded babies. Israel never said that. A French reporter incorrectly reported that, and everybody ran with it, and it ended up being not true. Or when you see like photos of burned babies, people are saying, oh, well, these are Photoshopped. No, they're not. There's no evidence of that. When you got the videos of them walking through that hospital and you see the tunnels and everything afterwards, they go, oh, well, actually, Israel built those tunnels, and there were just a few guns in that hospital, sitting around an MRI machine that hasn't been turned on for months. Like, even if they put out videos and images, it seems like it doesn't matter anyway. But yeah, okay, that was all the points I wanted to respond to. Go ahead.
Cenk, I think there's a lot to respond to there.
Yeah, just a couple of things. So first of all, you said that the decapitated babies was not Israel. That's actually not true. It wasn't an official statement, but it was, I believe it was an IDF soldier that originally mentioned that piece of propaganda, and then Netanyahu's wife repeated it to Biden, and Biden, that idiot, then repeated it as well. So it definitely came from Israel. It's not like the Palestinians were like, oh, we decapitated. No, the Israelis said that. And it was a piece of terrible, terrible propaganda. And I feel terrible because I actually fell for it in the beginning. I was furious at Hamas for what they had done on October 7th, and for many of the reasons that were real, and unfortunately that one as well. So, but the two giant issues here is, look, Destiny, I guess you think it makes sense for you, and I'm sure the people that are on the right-wing Israeli side think it makes sense. But when you all say that Hamas wants to kill civilians, first of all, I agree with that, okay? So they killed a whole bunch of soldiers too, but then they went out of their way to kill civilians. No question about that. We all agree to that. But when you say that Israel has accidentally killed 14 to 19,000 civilians, they're just collateral damage. That's where I don't think you realize that you sound like you're on a different planet. Like, everyone else is looking at that and going, there's no way they're that bad at aiming, that they just have killed a gigantic number of civilians. And now we're at, like I said, about 20 times the number of Palestinian civilians killed as Israeli civilians. So I don't know if 30 times, 40 times, 200 times the number of civilians is going to satisfy anyone, including you. I don't know if you're going to just keep calling them collateral damage. Oops, we killed another 10,000 Palestinian babies, another accident, honest mistake. We were trying to target Hamas in the tunnels, which we didn't get at all. But golly gee, we killed another 14,000 women and children. No, look, I got news for you. No one believes that. Literally no one else other than the hardcore right-wing Israeli side believes that in the whole planet, including in America. And then lastly,
wait, what about Destiny's point about that that Israel have dropped so many bombs, but less than one death per bomb? Does that mean that they're trying to be very accurate?
Yeah, I get it, and it's an interesting point, but it's also an ironic one. Well, we dropped 24,000 bombs in a place the size of Las Vegas, but we didn't, and we killed 19,000 people. But hey, our bombs didn't kill enough. I don't know if it's enough people. Like, yeah, I get what you're saying. Some of the bombs must have landed in areas where no one died. Thank God. But a lot of them landed in areas where people did die. In fact, 19,000 have died. So it's not like they missed. It's not like they did a small number of bombs.
Does it not show that they were trying to be very accurate?
Basically, what they're saying is we dropped a whole heap of bombs where there weren't people, and we dropped a whole heap of bombs where there were people. And I don't think that that's a great defense. So, and then finally, this is maybe the most important part of all this. I'm arguing for peace. I'm saying that if you went and did a deal with the Palestinian Authority, most experts believe that they would be very, very happy to take that deal. And then they would have the credibility to be able to gain control of Gaza and actually run a Palestinian state. The reason why the Palestinian Authority right now is in trouble, does not do elections, is because they have lost credibility. Because all they've done is help to occupy the West Bank, and they've gotten nothing in return. They've got no concessions. They've got no Palestinian state. They haven't gotten the two states. If Israel keeps going in this direction, the Palestinian Authority is going to lose credibility in the West Bank, and then all of a sudden, whether it's Hamas or another terrorist group, they're going to take over the West Bank, and then they're going to stop cooperating with Israel, and then Israel's going to come, and oh my God, I cannot imagine the number of people that they're going to murder in the West Bank. And so if someone like Hamas gets control of the West Bank and they hurt one settler, Israel will come and murder 10, 20, 30, 50,000 people in the West Bank. And then we will have an endless war, endless terrorism, endless chaos and blood, etc. Please, for God's sake, I don't care who started it. Get to peace as soon as humanly possible. But Destiny, when you say we cannot end the occupation because of October 7th, we cannot end it unless we have an impossible standard of wiping out everyone in Hamas. You're saying we're not going to get the peace. We're going to erode Palestinian Authority credibility, and we're going to have a bloody war where the Palestinians are going to be occupied and killed as far as the eye can see.
Okay, so as a first claim, Israel originally claimed, as they were going through houses, that there was a decapitated baby, and then there was a report that 40 baby bodies had been found, and at some point, these two things got conflated in the media, that there were 40 decapitated babies, and I think for some stupid reason, Biden repeated that there were 40 decapitated babies, but the Israeli media never confirmed that original claim. It was reported on CNN, it was reported, you can see where the IDF, the Israeli media, explicitly said that they cannot confirm. I don't think they confirmed any babies initially. I think it might have been, it was either a French reporter or somebody else, but so Israel did not originally, we can argue that the reports were wrong, or I mean that the 40 decapitated babies were wrong, that seems to be the case. However, the 40 decapitated babies, that original claim, my understanding is that never came from any Israeli media. I've never seen that substantiated. It seemed to be a mix-up. You can laugh if you want to throw the tweet, if you want to throw the link, or if you want to throw the source for that in chat, I'll easily take the L on that, but you're not going to be able to find it because that didn't happen, number one. Number two,
I want to agree in part. Can I just,
real
quick?
Go for it.
So Israeli media has actually been great on that. And Haaretz did a terrific job disproving the decapitated baby story. So, and Israeli media often does a good job. And Israeli courts within Israel, not the military courts, sometimes are fair. So I don't want people thinking, oh, there's nothing redeemable in Israel. Oh, Israel's all boogeyman. No, absolutely not. There are interesting parts of the Israeli democracy, and the media did a terrific job there. But Biden didn't get the from the Palestinians. He got it from the Israelis.
I don't even think Biden probably got it from Twitter, and I don't even think Biden said 40 beheaded babies. I think he said he saw pictures of beheaded babies. But again, there's zero evidence that propaganda claim, there's zero evidence that propaganda claim originated from Israel. There's no evidence of that from Israeli media. There is, however, evidence that the original hospital bombing claim, the really big one that drove media for arguably for weeks, that Israel had bombed a hospital and destroyed it and 500 plus people had died, that came straight from Hamas, and that was uncritically amplified by almost every mainstream and alternative media outlet across the world. And that was incredibly damning and incredibly damaging on the Israeli side, and it took a long time for people to take a critical look, and there are still people to this day that believes that it's like a 50-50 chance that Israel bombed that hospital, even though one, a hospital is not bombed, and two, there's absolutely zero evidence for that claim. So we want to talk about whose propaganda is doing better on which side. Every single day I'm hearing about another Palestinian killed, I'm hearing about these 3 hostages, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Like, and then there was that whole, the JDAM and the hospital bombing thing, that was a huge thing. To argue that like Israel is winning the propaganda war, I don't know if I believe that. When you say that Hamas was killing soldiers as well, I think it was like 100 soldiers to 1,100 civilians. So if we're going by ratios, Hamas technically did a worse job than Israel. Again, I don't know if I would go by ratios, but like
373 soldiers.
Was it 373 soldiers were killed? I thought it was like 120. Okay, there might have been a different number on that. Okay, so maybe it might be 300 soldiers to 900 civilians. Okay, but when Hamas sets out to kill people, I don't think they're doing any due diligence trying to figure out who's a civilian or who's a soldier. When I say collateral damage, it sounds like I'm on a different planet. So we can make these emotional appeals over and over again, and we can use like the number over and over again. But here are facts. Okay, we know that Hamas operates out of civilian areas. Even Amnesty International limited as much since 2014. We know that there are videos of medical people running and grabbing guns and giving it to Hamas fighters. We can watch those videos on YouTube. We know that Hamas has tunnels that it's built that operate underneath civilian infrastructure. We know that Hamas uses hospitals to bring captured hostages to. We know that Hamas used Al-Shifa as an interrogation site. Again, even Amnesty International and the UN said as much. We know that Hamas has fired rockets out of refugee areas and out of other medical operating areas. We know these things are true, okay? We know that. And we also know that Israel has been pressured to allow more humanitarian aid in, and they acquiesced to that pressure. We know that Israel gave the northern Gazans warning on when they were supposed to leave, told all of them to evacuate the area before the bombings week began. We know that Israel makes phone calls to certain buildings or houses to tell people that you need to leave, and we know that Israel does roof knocks before they bomb these things, okay? We know every single thing that I just said, and we can fight over any of these you want. These are all undisputed facts that are verified by third-party international orgs, some of which are quite hostile towards Israel. To go through all of that evidence and then to say, well, 18,000 civilians, so they must be indiscriminately targeting. That is a statement uttered without evidence, and it begs for any sort of justification whatsoever. There is none. There's no evidence that any of this exists. It is a fantastic point that's thought up in the West by people that are dealing with no actual facts on the ground of anything that's happening.
Thank you. I think that's a lot to respond to, yeah.
No, those 19,000 civilians are not dead.
Is that what I said?
I mean, you said that there was no evidence that the 18,000 people had died. I don't know.
I said there's no evidence that they were being indiscriminately targeted or intentionally killed by Israel.
It was all an accident.
Do you think they were intentionally trying to kill civilians?
Definitely.
Then why didn't they kill more? Why only 19,000?
Because they're doing it in a way where they have plausible deniability. for look, I'm sorry, I'm going to do my first insult, but for schmucks like you to go, well, they were moving them and they were being super gentle and they surrounded them with pillows and they warned them, and they killed 20 times as many civilians as Hamas did. But golly, gee, it was all an accident.
Gotcha. And I'll let you do your whole thing. I'm just curious. Do you have a single shred of evidence for any of that? That's what I thought. Okay, you can do your whole thing, but you have no evidence. You have no evidence for the indiscriminate targeting of civilians.
People are dead.
Are you just going to keep repeating the number? We can count if you want. We can spend the rest of the room counting up to 90,000.
Not civilians?
I'm saying they're not indiscriminately targeting civilians, and if you have a single shred of them indiscriminately targeting civilians, I'd like to hear it.
Targeting civilians, yes. Yeah. So my contention is, since they're dropping 2,000-pound bombs, dumb bombs, 29,000 bombs, etc., and they've killed 19,000 people, which are almost all civilians, but even if you take the IDF numbers, over 3/4 are civilians. My contention is that's not an accident.
Jen, can you respond to what Destiny said? He gave out a list of things saying that because Israel do all of these, therefore they're really trying to take security very seriously.
Yeah, I'm going to address that. But wait, so my contention is they didn't accidentally kill a disproportionate number of civilians. So you're saying your contention is they were trying their damnedest to not kill civilians.
Well, but the difference is you can say that in a goofy voice, but I gave you evidence of that. Cenk, I gave you evidence of that.
Cenk said you're going to respond to those points of evidence.
Yeah, you can try to put my side in a funny voice. I'm not using a funny voice. I'm saying that Israel allows in humanitarian aid at Western pressure. Israel delayed the invasion to give people time to flee. Israel told everybody in northern Gaza that a military conquest was coming, and Israel does do door knocking, and Israel does call buildings. These are all very strange actions from somebody that is trying to maximize civilian casualties.
Yeah, they're not at all straight. They're exactly what you would do if you wanted plausible deniability as you massacred civilians and committed war crimes.
What to actually put leaflets or to tell people to move away? How's that plausible deniability? Isn't that trying to take security very seriously?
Yeah, so in the beginning, when Israel had more brakes in the car, they would actually do the door knocking and the leaflets that you guys mentioned. And then there are tons of civilians who would die, but it was plausible deniability that was not unbelievable.
The Temple of the Moon
and
has
so
come to help
I remember
the
thinking it's not nearly good enough, but hey, they're
I have
trying,
heard of the kinds of carriages found on the back of the turtle you found.
Okay,
Those I do believe are Naga carriages, used both in battle and in transportation of their supplies.
Okay, so then now when you look at the actual facts on the ground,
box you found are of the Naga.
Destiny made it seem like it was like a humanitarian thing that they moved them from the north to the south. No, that's called ethnic cleansing and mass relocation. It was actually a hallmark of the Armenian genocide. That the Turks moved the Armenians to a place that was safer. Same thing with the Bataan Death March, the Chairlift Tears. All of that ethnic cleansing is the definition of a war crime. You made it seem like it was humanitarian. Then once they got it into the south, then they started bombing the south. There's literally nothing humanitarian about it. It's just one war crime that compounds another war crime. It's not even close. It's the size of Vegas. They moved it to half the size of Vegas, and then they started dropping bombs on the south. It's totally indefensible. I am speaking out against terrorism that is coming from Hamas or any Palestinian side. And I'm also speaking out against what I think is terrorism from the Israeli side, as they kill 20 times the civilians that Hamas did. You, on the other hand, seem to be saying the Palestinians do terrorism wherever they go and they're terrible and we have to keep an indefinite occupation. But the Israelis, when they kill disproportionate number of civilians and 20 times the civilians that Palestinians do, are not doing terrorism, are the good guys, and it's all just an accident. And that's why I do the voice, Destiny, because that seems ridiculous and totally not believable.
What else could Israel have done to minimize casualties? I'm curious.
Yes, I have that too.
Okay.
So, and I am not saying this today. I said it on day of. What they should have done is something that is very hard but doable. Special forces. So it's not going in there and saying, "Hey, Hamas, it's okay that you."
No. We're talking about within how they're doing right now, as far as
even day of. What is this special forces talking point is brought up over and over and over again. I don't know if it's ironically as the professional video game player. I don't know if people are watching too many movies, video games. You don't send special forces into a densely urban populated area and have 100 soldiers kill, you know, like 5,000 enemy members. That's not how special forces work. Most of the time, these are either serving for highly specialized missions, or they're serving in support roles. What do you mean send in special forces to remove Hamas? Can you tell me what that operation looks like?
Yeah, so it would involve some degree of ground invasion, I understand that. But it would not involve indiscriminate bombings. I'm sorry, the very targeted bombings that just happen to accidentally kill all those tens of thousands of civilians. It would have involved ground invasion. Obviously, you clear some degree of path to get to the tunnels, and then you send people inside the tunnels. Now, that is very dangerous, but that's the whole point of special forces. But if you go inside the tunnels, number one, you get to Hamas much more efficiently. Number two, you might actually rescue the hostages. Instead,
by just sending people into tunnels that the enemy has built and knows the entire layout of and has every control over, you just send random special forces that, what is it, like a nation of Rambos? Or
the hard fighting, you don't want to actually rescue.
It's not
because they're not relevant without me, and I don't give a about any of them.
Just don't name them.
Just
Damn, he just lets it there. He just gets mogged by Mike. He's not gonna give a counter argument. He just okays it and then quits. Oh, what? He does a post-edit debate and he doesn't let Mike respond? What? What? Why Andrew Tate cut off Aiden Ross and Sneeko?
There's that walk in the footsteps of you, but I feel like miss, or maybe they don't miss. I kind of want to like ask you, how do you feel about like the Aiden Rosses, the Sneeko, Zerka, all of these people that kind of walk in the realm of where you want? Like Neon is one now. Like, how do you feel about these gentlemen?
I think they're all different people. I don't pay attention to any of them. I know something about, I mean, I don't want to insult anybody. I don't want to talk about anybody negative.
Roadblock protests work and are probably one of the less harmful types of protests. Really? Work for what? What is an example of a roadblock protest that works that didn't already have like super widespread popular support?
Zerka's a clown.
I mean, dude, no. I'm not laughing because it's Zerka thing. It just caught me so off guard. Listen, I'm not gonna talk shit about anybody. I'm gonna be very respectful. But f that guy.
4611 into the Scuffed podcast, you roast Aiden for wanting to live in Florida for stupid Andrew Tate and conservative reasons. This is what may have put him into attack mode for the rest of the pod. Sorry, I had to bring it up. Did I say that before he made the wife comments or not? I might have said that, but like, bro, hold on. I'm sorry. Am I not allowed to like make any comment at all about anything? That wasn't a personal attack. I was just saying like, oh, everybody wants to live in Florida. It's either because they think that's like a conservative haven or there's like some Donald Trump fans or whatever. Like, that's retarded. Aiden started at around 38 minutes in the video. Oh, and Aiden went in first, so f you. Okay. It was a personal attack though? No, shut the f up. How are you guys so weak? Oh God, take me back to the year 2000. Oh, f me, I need to get off this. I need to get off this f***ing internet, dude.
Okay, Zerka.
I mean, I'm just trying to be honest. I understand your question, but I don't see myself as similar to any of them. I think that.
No, I never said you were similar. I think that they're trying to recreate your formula.
Oh,
it's like the Krabby Patty formula. You know how Plankton's sitting around being like, how do they do it? And then they're trying to do it, but it's not really working.
Yeah, but they lack substance. They have no lessons to teach. They have no life experience. They are clowns.
He didn't go in first. You just got offended off him asking about your divorce. Are these Aiden Ross fans in my chat? Are you 12 years old?
Clowns. And when you're a clown, you embarrass yourself for other people's entertainment. I mean, I don't want to. Aiden, I know well.
I think people wanted you to have hindsight into Aiden's sensitive nature. He was going to hit you personally, even if you made the slightest dig. That's fine if he wants to, but then get ready to go back and forth. Like, don't get sad when I start like hitting back. Like, it's so easy.
Sneeko, I know well.
Are you close with Aiden?
Yeah, I speak to him often. But Neom or whatever his name is, he's a clown and Zerk's a clown. I don't want to insult them too much, but they're just children being stupid. And I think that as the world devolves into insanity, people are looking for solutions and answers, as I said earlier, which I can provide. They can't provide that because they don't have the life experience or the intellect or the capability, so all they can do is provide cheap entertainment at their own expense. When you're a clown, you embarrass yourself for other people to laugh.
Yeah,
and
the Joker effect.
Yeah, and it's a completely different subsect, but I do feel like there are some people who are trying to follow in my footsteps, and imitation is certainly flattering. It was always going to happen. There was always going to be people who were trying to be me, but there will always be one top G, so it is what it is.
They're just highlighting the more insulting version of you than they are
5K